and welcome to day 81 of the epic journey. As you can see, I have a camera person. Turn the camera around so they can see you.
Wait, I can't do this.
There you go. That's Siobhan, my youngest daughter. She's been cameraman for me today. Right, turn it back again. And me.
What about you?
Artists, we've got something serious to talk about today. I got a message from a lady named Michelle Scott Brzezinski that you would have heard me mention from time to time. Michelle has asked a couple of questions in the past. Today she asked a question that has already been asked of me. The first time I didn't quite take it too seriously because I didn't know much about it, but Michelle has opened a can of worms. I don't remember please forgive me if it's you that's watching, but I don't remember the name of the lady that sent me the message the first time. But the question the first time was phrased, how or what is my opinion on washing paintbrushes in baby oil? Now at the time, I had not heard of it before, and I actually said so in my reply. I said, well, I've not heard that theory before, but off the top of my head, I would say sounds like a pretty decent idea based on the fact that many years ago when I was doing porcelain painting, we used to condition our brushes in liquid paraffin, which is a similar sort of oil. So if you're going to be conditioning brushes in it, sounds like not too bad of an idea, but make sure that your brushes are well washed out with turps before you start painting with them, because you don't want any of the baby oil to end up in your paint. And I left it at that. I will admit to not having given it very much attention until Michelle sent me a message today. Because Michelle's message read something slightly differently. Michelle said, Dalene, what is your feeling on mixing baby oil with your paint and using baby oil as a medium as well as washing brushes in it? And straight away the red flags went up, because baby oil is not a medium. So instead of just giving Michelle an answer, I thought, let me give it some attention, and I went and did some extensive research. Now that research is going to bring me to quite a lot of other things that have been going on in my studio, which is why I'm actually showing you my studio tonight, because I want to give you some backstory of the research that I was doing today. First of all, I want to say, when you guys ask me questions, I will answer them from either research that I've done or experimentation that I've done myself, or a combination of both. If it is something I don't know, I will go and find the answer. And that's what happened today with the baby oil question. I've never heard of an artist, I've never until recently come across this idea of mixing your paint. In fact, until today, I'd never heard of mixing your paint with baby oil. But I will tell you that I've heard some weird stuff, not the least of which is mixing your paint with soap and water, washing your brushes in soap and water. I find that very strange. But we will get back to that. But what I want to show you here behind me is a painting. That painting in the corner there is a painting of my husband that I did that's probably been sitting there, I thought maybe 4 years, but I think it's actually closer on 5 years. Now the reason it's sitting there is because I'm using it as a curtain, literally. That corner gets the very early sunrise. For most of the day, in fact, it gets really strong sunshine, particularly in summer. Now, I had researched a while ago that the fluctuation in temperatures that your paint is subject to creates all kinds of problems. And I had this painting that at that stage was quite freshly painted, and I figured this is actually a good way to experiment. I'm expecting that painting to sit there for a good few years before I can actually give you a genuine answer to that question. The theory is that over a period of years, if your painting is subjected to fluctuations of temperature in excess of 10 degrees at a time, so between, let's say, in this case it'll be bright sunshine that's shining right on it, so it's going to be very hot, and then at night, particularly in winter, it's going to be very cold. What that constant expansion and contraction is going to do, it's going to cause that paint to weaken over time, and the expected result is that we're going to start seeing cracks appearing in that paint. Now, you won't see it now because it's actually nighttime, and in the daytime you can actually see it quite clearly. As the sun shines through that paint, you can see the cracks already. It's been up there for 5 years. I can see the cracks. Just come a little bit closer. In this area here, you won't see it now like I say, but in this area here particularly, there's quite a lot of cracking that has already happened. So in 5 years, this painting has already been compromised severely to the point that it is actually no longer a viable piece of canvas. This painting is not part of the experiment, it just happens to be there. I then have, turn around, follow me. I then have up here a painting that catches the afternoon sun. This painting, although I'm also using it as a notice board, as you can see, it is also severely subject to temperature changes. The difference between the two paintings, that this one is painted much more impasto, the paint is thicker. So I'm also interested to see how that is going to be affected by temperature fluctuations. That painting, however, has not been there. Okay, can you turn around here? That painting, however, has not been there for as long. It's probably only been there for about 2 years. I'm not seeing any cracks and damage to that painting yet. So that brings me back to this point. Now, the reason I told you that backstory is to show you guys that I take these things really, really seriously, and I really want answers that I know that I can trust, because I want to be able to prove it to myself. And in the process of proving it to myself, I'm going to prove it to you too. So we are going to face this baby oil question from a slightly different angle. Like I said, I did a whole lot of research on it today, and the research that I was able to find was very thin on the ground. It seems that there are some forums where artists are discussing the use of baby oil either as conditioning oil for their brushes, cleaning oil for their brushes, or mixing in with their paint. But I found one forum that was discussing it, wetcanvas.com, if I remember correctly, was the one forum that was discussing it. And I found an artist that seems to be pretty above board, because I read a whole lot of his blogs, and he was discussing some stuff that I completely agree with, that seems to be really backed up with fact. And one of his blogs was talking about the use of baby oil as a brush cleaner. He didn't discuss it as a paint medium. So not having been able to find very much research or very much information on using it as a paint medium, I've decided that I decided to approach it from a slightly different angle. I actually then started to research baby oil itself. Now, the very first bit of research that I did, of course, came up and told me that baby oil was a mineral oil. Now, that's obviously where the red flags went up, because I knew that baby oil and liquid paraffin were a very similar oil, and I know that liquid paraffin doesn't dry. So my immediate thought was that, well, then surely baby oil won't dry. But of course, I didn't know that categorically yet. But having read the forums that I did and having done the research that I did on baby oil today, I can categorically tell you from the research that is out there, that is not my own, that it doesn't dry. The result of that is that your drying process, your oxidation process in your paints over a period of time is going to be severely compromised. What I can tell you about liquid paraffin, what I have in the bottle in front of me here is, I'm sure you can see how liquid it is. This is a bottle of liquid paraffin that I used to use as a medium when I was doing porcelain painting. Now, this is just a sample of a porcelain painting that I had done, and on the back here I've got May 2000, so this plate is nearly 17 years old, and this was one of the last pieces that I painted as a porcelain painter. Now, the process that this plate would have gone through is that the pigment that we used back in the day when I was doing porcelain painting was a dry powder, same pigment that you'll find in your tubes of paint today, except that we bought them as dry powders, and we mixed them with liquid paraffin, and we then painted them onto our pre-fired or pre-glazed plates or pieces of ceramic. That then stayed wet. It never dried. In fact, I had one in my cupboard once for months, which I forgot that I hadn't fired, and I wiped it and all the paint just wiped off. It never ever dries. So for me to get this dry, I've got to put it in a kiln, and I would have had to fire it between 800 and 1200 degrees Celsius, depending on what colors are on here. The darker, browner and bluer colors came out better in the higher firings, and the reds and yellows and oranges came out better in the lower firings. So it was a little bit technical. Why is it that I was able to use liquid paraffin on a plate and I can't use it on canvas? Well, the reason is because the plate went into the kiln. The kiln fired at in excess of 800 degrees centigrade, and the oil burnt off. Also then at high heat, what would happen is the surface of the ceramic would almost melt, because it's a glass. The glaze over the plate is glass. So the surface of the ceramic would melt, the pigment would sink into the surface, into the glaze, the oil would burn off, and it would actually be the glaze, which had melted and then subsequently hardened, that would carry the pigment. So the oil is literally just something to make it workable. So it didn't matter what oil we used. We had different oils for different types of things that we were doing. Some were more fluid, some were thicker, depending on the effect that you were going to get. But at the end of the day, as long as the oil burnt off and didn't leave a residue on the plate, it really didn't matter what you can use. It didn't matter what oil you used. That is not true with oil painting. And the reason it's not true with oil painting is because oil painting is subject to oxidation, not burning off or evaporation, which means that the oil, if it doesn't dry, is going to cause you big problems. Now what happens with baby oil, according to the research that I've done today, the carrier oil that your paint is already mixed with when you buy it in its tube is actually what's going to give you this false impression of it being dry. But in fact, the oxidation process is never ever going to completely stop, and it's never ever going to be completely satisfactory either. So what will happen is you'll get this thin microscopic film of dried paint, and underneath it the paint is going to stay wet for decades and decades to come. It is going to go glassy. It is going to collect dust and be thick and ugly. Have you ever been into a fish and chip shop and seen little bits of cooking oil in the corners and it's all gooey? And well, apparently that's what's going to happen to your painting over time. If you're painting for experimental purposes and the painting that you're doing now is going to end up in the trash heap, or you're not really worried about the future of that painting, then by all means do exactly as you please. It's not an issue. But please do not ever mix your paint with baby oil if you're intending to sell that product. I have got paintings that have been sitting in my attic and are now out of the attic that I did when I was 15 and 16 years old, and they're still good. They're still flexible. The canvas still flexes. In fact, the one is off its canvas and it's still flexing off its supports, and it's still flexing really nicely. Because back then, I'm 46 now, so that was 30 years ago. Those canvases are 30 years old. Those canvases are still good canvases. I was taught to correctly apply my paint according to the chemistry of the paint that we're working with. Now, had I not done that all those years ago, those paintings would have, in the 30 years subsequently, cracked and peeled and done all sorts of horrible things. Now, if you as an artist are using the incorrect materials now, okay, let's take me for example. I'm 46. I've still got a good 30 or 40 years, God willing, of an art career ahead of me. Now, what is going to happen to my art career in 10 years' time if I use inferior materials now? In 10 years' time, my reputation as an artist may be tarnished because of inferior materials that I used 10 years ago. My paintings are starting to show signs of inferior quality paints or inferior quality materials or whatever the case may be, and my reputation is going to be tarnished, as well as the paintings are going to be tarnished. So it's important for you as an artist to make sure that the materials that you use are the correct ones. Now, at the end of this, I'm going to do an experiment, because now that I've done the research and I'm pretty convinced that my initial instinctive reaction to baby oil was correct, I'm actually going to do an experiment to prove it. Now, Siobhan, if you'll just do me a favor, just point there. Now, what I've got here is a couple of shot glasses. There's 10 shot glasses at the back end. I've got them numbered 1 to 10, and then I've got another 6 shot glasses in the front here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put in these little shot glasses bits of baby oil, bits of safflower oil, and bits of alkyd medium. And we're going to let this sit. I've got 10 here that I'm going to put baby oil into, and I'm going to let them sit for 10 days. And every day I'm going to check one of them. At the end of every video lesson or video tutorial, we're going to come and check up on our experiment. Okay, lift up. So we'll do that in a minute. But before I do that, I want to draw your attention to one more thing. The art that you produce is an extension of yourself. All right. I think it was T.S. Eliot or C.S. Lewis or one of those people, I don't remember who, but one of them said, friendship like art is not essential to survival, but friendship like art makes life worth surviving. Words to that effect. Do not underestimate what you do. If it was so easy to do, everybody would be doing it. If it was less valuable than academic stuff like doctors and lawyers and, you know, research scientists and all these sort of really hectically clever people that we associate as being the brains of this world, if art was not in that category, everybody would be doing it. What you're doing is incredibly difficult. It's difficult to learn, it's difficult to execute, it takes a lot of personal effort, it takes a lot of soul investment into it. Why would you take something that is so incredibly personal and so incredibly valuable and diminish it by trying to save a couple of bucks on the oil that you used to put into it? I do understand that there are health issues concerned with the solvents that we use, and that people might be using baby oil to try and get away from using solvents. I do get that. But there's a couple of different things that you can do to stop yourself from breathing in the solvent fumes. The most obvious one, of course, is to make sure that your room is well ventilated. Make sure that windows are open, doors are open, that you've got a through draft and you're not going to have a problem. I've been painting half my life, more than half my life, and I have not yet had a problem with it because I make sure I'm in a well ventilated room. If however you're still very anti the solvents, we've got access nowadays with modern paints to water soluble oils. Water soluble oils are just as good. What's happened with water soluble oils is that the linseed oil has just been broken down already so that it's easy to wash away with water. You can mix it with water. Please do not put soap into it, but you can mix them with water and you can paint with them like water, like acrylics, and that will mean that you don't have to use any solvent. Again, if you don't want to use water soluble oils, you've got acrylics. There's no reason to treat your oils badly. If you're going to treat your oils badly by putting substandard oils into it or using substandard products with it, you might as well not spend the money on brushes or canvases or oils at all. You might as well either not do it or choose a different medium rather. Choose acrylic that you don't have to use a solvent with. Personally, I'm not in favor of acrylic, but only because of the drying times. I prefer to work with oils, and I prefer the chemistry of oils, and I prefer the product that you get from it. You are an incredibly valuable human being with an incredibly valuable talent, and if you treat your talent as second rate, then it's going to be second rate. Give it the respect that it deserves. Give the painting that you're producing the respect that it deserves by using the correct products with it. Okay, so I'm now going to put into these 10, just film me while I'm doing it, and then what I'll do is I'll speed up the footage. I'm going to put a teaspoon or possibly 2, let's just see how much is filled, into each one of these, and then every day we're going to check it, and I want to see what time and oxygen, what the effect is of time and oxygen on all these different baby oils, little pots of baby oil over the next 10 days. Baby oil contains absolutely nothing else other than mineral oil and perfumes. Now, mineral oil is an extract from the petroleum industry, and mineral terps, mineral oil, goes without saying. Red flags all over the place. You don't put mineral products into your oil paints. That's all I have to say about that. Okay, so what we have here is 10 little shot glasses with a teaspoonful, and it's actually, I don't know if you can see it in the camera, there's a decent amount. Is the camera going to focus so closely?
I don't think so.
There's a decent amount of oil at the bottom of each of those. Now I'm going to do the same thing after having wiped my spoon clean. I'm going to put a teaspoon of safflower oil into 3 of them. I'm not going to do it as many as before because these are just going to be my control tests. Because I know what's going to happen to the safflower and the alkyd oils, but I want to be able to show it physically. So I'm going to have 3 of safflower oil. Let's wipe the spoon again. And then I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to put 3 shot glasses of alkyd oil. Now the alkyd oil, of course, is really thick.
Wait, how is it an oil if it's so thick?
It's actually a resin, it's not an oil. It's got a very high oil content, but it's actually a resin. Now I'm going to need my finger to get it in there because it's so much thicker.
So it's like amber, because amber.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
Charlotte, just in the house.
I must say the baby oil is making my arteries smell nice. Okay folks, so we've got 10 shot glasses of baby oil, 3 of safflower oil and 3 of alkyd oil. I'm not going to cover this because I want the oxygen to get to it. I am however going to just place the lid on top of it because I don't want a lot of dust and rubbish to fall into it, and I'm going to leave it here on what is actually my junk table. Have you got it up? I'm going to leave it here on what is actually my rubbish table, and we're going to every day check that and see how that baby oil is coping, and then the other 2 oils are going to be the control test. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to be able to back up what I'm saying with hard fact, and I want to prove those facts not only to you but to myself, because If you guys have watched any of my videos from the start, you'll know that the reason I'm doing this is, the reason I started doing this in the first place was to dispel some of the completely ludicrous lessons that are floating around, and I know where it comes from. I understand that people do things not out of because they don't care, but because that's what they've been taught by somebody that they know and trust, possibly, or some sort of source that they know and trust, and they trust it. They feel that they've been told the right thing. You don't know that what you've been told is wrong, and the only way to figure that out is in 10 or 20 years time, when something happens to a painting and you realize that everything that you've been doing for the last 10 or 20 years is been wrong, because one of your paintings is showing signs of it. So if there's any message that I can get through, it's that as an artist, your work is worth the time it takes to fully cross-reference and to give your paintings the best shot by using the right products with them. Do not compromise on medium. I think probably your medium is probably the most important tool that you've got in your tackle box. Over your paint quality, over your brushes. Other than your talent, your medium is the most important thing. And of course your solvent. Your medium and your solvent are the most important items that you've got in your box. Make sure you use a good quality one. So Michelle, to answer your question, no. I would never, ever advise any of my in-studio artists or my Facebook page or YouTube artists ever to use baby oil. It's a mineral oil. It is not going to do your painting any good. All it's going to do is make it smell nice. And that is not the point. So artists, thank you very much for joining me on this. I'm looking quite forward to seeing that experiment happen over the next 10 days. I'll tell you what I'm expecting to see. Nothing. I'm expecting to see nothing happen to that baby oil. And if that happens, we know for sure that baby oil is not the way to go. If, however, it does dry and we can peel it off from the bottom of the cup, I will concede. So thanks very much again for joining me, and I will see you tomorrow in day 82. Bye. That's what you want to do. Yeah.